Well, I want to thank you all for showing up, especially showing up to a night of reflection without a title. Right, so none of you know what I'm about to speak. I think this Easter season calls for a discussion or an investigation into what does it mean to follow Jesus, and how is it that we are following this resurrected Christ, the Christ who walked to his death for us. That first reading tonight kind of inspired why I chose this topic. The Christian life may be likened to soldiery. There's a long tradition of seeing the spiritual life as a battle between good and evil. And it is no surprise then to see a man like St. Ignatius, a man whose early life was so dedicated to feudal soldiery and to glory won on a battlefield, that he would adopt the image of Christian soldiery and build it into his spiritual exercises, build it into the very foundation and the fundamental understanding of Ignatian spirituality. So I want to talk a little bit about what does it mean to look at the spiritual life as Christian soldiery. What does it mean to be a Christian soldier? What does it call forth from us? You and I can be Christian soldiers in one of three ways. We can be soldiers of fear, we can be soldiers of duty, and we can be soldiers of love. There are three very different responses to the Christian life, to Christ and our God, and those are the three. Here's a story, perhaps, about what it might look like to be a loving Christian soldier. There's a man right before World War II breaks out named Desmond Doss. Desmond was a scrawny, 150-pound Seventh-day Adventist Christian man who saw what happened at Pearl Harbor and, like the rest of the country, was outraged, who felt, I need to stand up and defend my country, defend the land that has given me so much. I owe so much to this land. I love this land, and it has been hurt. I want to stand up and defend it. So he runs to the army and enlists. Now, Desmond is an odd person to enlist into the army, for Desmond, in his devout Christianity, refuses to his very core and being to take a life. He wants to join the army, but not fight. And he goes to the recruitment officer and says, I would like to enlist like everybody else. All of my friends have come. Here I am to enlist. But please, can you put me in something where I don't have to touch a gun? And they laughed at him. But he wouldn't move. And he said there, it's like, look, I will do anything you want me to, but I will not touch a gun. It's against my religious beliefs. Please let me in. And they said no. And he went and he complained to the guy's superiors and that guy's superiors, and he pestered them and badgered them. They said, okay, fine, we'll make you a medic. And Desmond Doss says, this is perfect. I will go and fight for my country, but instead of taking lives, I will be giving life, protecting life, lengthening life in this war. So he entered as a conscientious, this is what he called himself, a conscientious participator. Right, the army brought him in, and immediately he was put in with a regiment of soldiers who were not medics. And they run him through all the drills, the running, the crawling under barbed wire, and he does it all just as good as everybody else, maybe even better because his heart is really, really in it. And then it gets to the day to introduce him to the weapons, and he won't touch it. And his platoon drill instructor just loses it and starts screaming and yelling at him, right? And he tells him, well, when I entered, they said I didn't have to touch a gun, and I'm not doing that. And all of his comrades in his battalion are like, who is this guy that won't touch a gun? And they're all upset. And so they tried to drum him out. And so the drill instructor is putting him through extra duty, making him run extra laps, doing all this, trying to break his will. The guys in the unit with him are saying, I'm not going to battle with a man who refuses to touch a gun. And so every night they would beat him, trying to get him to drop out of the army, to walk away. But he refused. He stayed day in, day out, doing twice the amount of duties and the punishments given to him by his commanding officers who were trying to get him to quit, getting all these beatings from all the men in his platoon. Finally, they tried to bounce him from the army. They tried to court-martial him, but they couldn't find grounds to do so, so they relented and left him and put him into the medical unit. So time passes, and he finally gets his chance to go to war, and he's sent to the Pacific Theater. And they go, and quickly he ends up stationed, embedded amongst the same battalion, the same troops who beat him day in and day out at that boot camp. And they went and they fought a battle, and the men around him started to notice something interesting about this one medic who refused to carry a gun, the only one, because even the medics were armed with guns, that he would run into the field and not duck and not hide, run into fire to grab the wounded soldiers who nobody else would go to get. So people started noticing this real quickly. And then one day, there was a day on a place called Hacksaw Ridge. If this is all sounding familiar, Mel Gibson wrote a movie about this, so I'm just recounting to you the movie. On Hacksaw Ridge, a 75-foot or 100-foot steep, straight up and down cliff. The U.S. soldiers are on the beach, and they've got to climb up this cliff, and the Japanese soldiers are up top, embedded in caves, and they all climb 100 feet or however tall it was. They climb up this kind of rope ladder, and they get up to the top, and quickly they're mowed down, and all day they go up there, and they get pushed back, go up and retreat over and over. The casualties are immense. And as night begins to fall, the American troops retreat once again, and as Desmond Doss is retreating with the men, he hears a groaned cry, "Help me," muttered in English, and he turns around as the rest of his entire battalion is well on their way down the cliff, and he looks around for that man's voice, and he runs around until he finds him, and he grabs the guy, and he realizes he is alone on the top of this mountain with the Japanese soldiers firing at him constantly. He's the only target, and they keep shooting. And he grabs the man, and he drags him, and he doesn't know how he's going to get him down, so he gets rope, and he ties a rope ladder, and he wraps it around the guy, and he lets him down by hand all the way down the cliff. And as he's about to join him, right after he got him down, he's about to climb down, he heard another voice, "Help me," in English, and he runs back to find someone else. And he gets him, and he ties a rope around him and drops him down, and he hears another voice. And he heard another voice 75 times. He went back into fire by himself. They've interviewed the Japanese soldiers in the years past, and the Japanese soldiers, we all saw him, we were all shooting for him, but my gun kept jamming. I couldn't hit the guy to save my life. They didn't know why. And Desmond Doss would just found himself up on that mountain, fearing for his life, but praying one prayer over and over, "God, just one more. Let me get just one more." And the American troops who had actually moved off the beach, a couple of them had come back to gather some supplies, and they noticed all these soldiers dangling, wounded, and they started picking them up. He saved like half a platoon or something, I don't know. And everyone goes, what is going on? They had no idea who was doing this and who was bringing him down. And finally, Desmond, not having found anybody else for a while, himself comes down, bloodied, his hands. He's got almost no skin on his hands for having lowered those ropes over and over and over again. And those men that he saved, it turned out to be the very men who beat him day after day after day. Interestingly enough, a few days later, after they rested, he got some healing. He decided he was ready, and he wanted to go back out with the troops. They had bombed the top of that mountain range, and they were going to climb up and make another charge. But it was Saturday, the Sabbath for a seventh-day guy. And they were standing at the bottom, and the order to go from the generals and the ships was to charge now, and nobody moved. And everyone's wondering, why are we standing here? And the general's like, go, we said to fight. And the guy got on the horn, he said, "We can't go, sir. Desmond Doss is praying, and the men won't go without him." You've seen, if you look at the interviews of the men whose lives he saved, the very men who beat him, you can see it in their face. You can find these interviews online. or at the end of the movie that Mel Gibson's got, and you can see the look in their eyes. It is a look of pure love. I don't care if Desmond Doss would have moved to the moon, they would have found a way to get there to celebrate his birthday every year. And they would never have dreamed of complaining about it because they saw what he did and they were so grateful. The same thing happens to many men who've had somebody jump on a grenade for them. You can see this look in their eyes. It's a beautiful thing. It's the exact type of gratitude and love that you and I are supposed to feel towards God. The thing is, our God has jumped on more grenades for us than it is possible for us to even possibly comprehend. St. Ignatius wants you to understand that feeling of gratitude. He wants you to understand what it means to truly look at your life, to look at your sins, to look at Christ and see what he's done and feel the same way that those soldiers felt when they looked upon the face of Desmond Doss, the man whom they themselves beat, coming to save their lives. Pure, unadulterated gratitude and love. St. Ignatius, in this spiritual exercises, he does a couple of things. The first thing he does is takes you through the first week, which is all about your sins. And it's not meant to beat yourselves up. It's not meant to say, look how terrible and bad I am, but it's to take a deep and honest look at just every single way that you have turned your back on God. He actually asks you to ask this question. Think of the angels, the ones that were fallen. How many times did they sin? Just once. And then Ignatius has you think, how many times have I? Adam and Eve, how many mistakes did they make? Just one. How many times do I keep making mistakes? And the angels fell from heaven as their punishment, and Adam and Eve are kicked out of the garden for that punishment. But you and I are forgiven over and over and over because of that. We look at our sins not to feel bad, but to have that beginning, that movement of just desperate gratitude. That is the beginning of love. I told you there are 3 types of ways to become a Christian soldier. The first way is a soldier of fear. A soldier who is drafted into the army. He didn't want to go. Imagine this man. He goes into the army, they pulled him in, he didn't want to be there. He puts on the uniform, not because he's proud. He shines his shoes and makes his bed only because he fears the punishment. He goes to battle, and he is sitting there in his heart of hearts, praying that he does not have to be where the fighting is. And if the fighting breaks out, what does he do? Will he still be standing there next to you, shoulder to shoulder, with his brothers in arms, or will he run? And on the day that his term of service up, it doesn't matter if they're in the middle of the battle, he will say, I am done, and walk away. Because he was only out of there. He was only there out of a fear of punishment. I think about ourselves in our lives. When you're a child, right, and your parent tells you to make your bed when you're very young, you only do it. The only reason you're making that bed is for a fear of not being able to watch cartoons or not playing the video game or losing the car keys over the weekend. But hopefully, by the time you've advanced to high school, at least the thought has crossed your mind, well, these are my parents. They've given me everything. I guess I at least owe it to them to make this bed. I think about all the ways we can show up to work. Do we show up to work, or is the responsibilities of our lives just trying to do it to avoid whatever punishment might come for our not having done it? In the Christian life, it looks like this. Do you just do enough not to go to hell? Are we just trying not to break the rules? Is that it? And are we only following the rules so that we don't get in trouble? That is a fearful soldier. Now here's the thing. It's good to be a fearful soldier. It at least keeps you following the rules. You're saved. God offers us a low bar. That's good enough. Just follow the 10 Commandments. Essentially, that'll get you through. Get baptized, follow the 10 Commandments, and go to Mass once a week and receive communion once a year. That's all you need to do. But that's all a fearful soldier need do. And when it gets really hard, when the battle actually breaks out, do you run? Do you fail? Do you fall away? The second type of soldier you could imagine is the dutiful soldier. He's the man, somewhat like Desmond, who saw the bombing of Pearl Harbor and said, "This is unjust. This country of mine that has given me everything, it's kept me safe, it's offered me freedom, it has been harmed. I owe it to this country to defend it." So that man, he goes, he joins the army, he stands there, he puts his uniform on, he shines his shoes, because that's what he's supposed to do. That's what the rules say, and that's what he's going to do. He's not afraid of the punishment. He's happy to do these things, but he's just doing them because this is his duty as a soldier. This is a good thing. This is better than being a fearful soldier. When the fighting breaks out, he'll go, usually, probably, he'll stand his ground. He won't run, he won't hide. But like the fearful soldier, the day his term of service is up, is he gone? I'll tell you what he's not doing. He's not saying to his brothers in arms, he's not saying to his commanders, "Where's the fighting the worst? Put me there." He's not giving it the extra mile. He's doing what is due. It's a matter of justice, the dutiful soldier. So much of us have this in our lives. We can at least look up and say, God has given me everything. This entire life that I have, the very breath that I have, I owe it to God at least to follow these rules. I owe it to God to go to Mass on Sunday, whether I want to be there or not. I can go there without complaining and at least not hold a grudge. This is the child who obeys and makes his bed, because he owes it to his parents at least. He doesn't need to do it at the end of a stick. And finally, the loving soldier. I submit that this is Desmond. The one who said, not only do I owe my country, I love my country. And this is the guy who puts on his uniform that first time, and you can see him beaming with pride as he polishes every medal, every stick on him. His shoes are shining. He makes his bed, because that's what a good soldier does. And he walks down the street with his chest out proud, doing good things so other people see how wonderful this uniform is, what it stands for freedom and respect and for honor. And he goes and fights, and he looks at his commander and he says, "Where are you going? Put me there. I don't want another soldier to have to die in my stead." And even if his term of service is up, he will not abandon his friends in the fight. He will continue on till the end. I imagine thinking about SEAL Team 6. Presumably, there's at least 5 other teams. How did SEAL Team 6 get chosen, right? The rumors are, at least the word around Washington, is that most of the SEAL teams got in a fight, in an argument. They were actually complaining to see who would get to go. They wanted to be the ones to risk their lives, to defend their country, to bring justice. They didn't want somebody else to possibly die in their stead. Now we, brothers and sisters, most of us are not in a literal army. And at any given time in your life, you are probably any one of those 3. Someday, St. Ignatius woke up and said, "The only reason I haven't sinned today is because of fear of hell. I just wasn't feeling it today, but I stayed in line because of fear." And then on the good days, love kicks in. The prodigal son is an interesting story. It has all of these soldiers in there. If you think of the little son, right, who's taken all of his father's inheritance, he tells his dad, "Dad, I'm going to pretend you're dead. Give me your money now." And he goes to a foreign land and spends it all and finds himself sitting in a puddle of mud. And down there, sitting in the puddle of mud, wishing he was fed with the stuff they're feeding pigs. And he thinks to himself, you know what? If I go home, right, my father's servants have enough to eat. I could go home, right, and just be hired on as a servant, and that would be good enough for me, right? He's thinking in these categories. It never occurs to him that his father would forgive him. It never occurs to him that his father would forgive him. He's a son of fear. It never dawns on him that love might be in the mix. He will be a servant. He will do just what it takes. The son, the other brother, right, is the dutiful soldier. This one is looking at his dad like, look what I did. I served in your vineyards my whole life. I didn't do anything wrong, and you didn't throw a party for me. What's going on in here? He demands justice, the justice that is due him and due his father. And the father is the one who just lavishly gives. The father is the one who's willing to pretend he's dead for the goodness of his son, the loving soldier. Fear, duty, and love. The lessons that we learned from the first week of the exercises. That you are beloved sons and daughters of God, and that though you have turned your back on God and sinned on a daily basis, He has done that for you. Christ is the true soldier of love, who came down to sit with us in the battle that is our lives, in the suffering, in the sin, in the death of our lives, and said, I will stand next to you the whole way because I love you. We have three choices to respond. And Ignatius takes us to his call of the King. It's the first exercise you do when you get out of the first week of the exercise. When you look at the sins of your life and you realize He did that for you and you start to feel this gratitude, and then Ignatius asks you, let's do this call of the King exercise. And let me ask you to imagine the greatest king that you've ever heard of, the most just king ever imaginable. This is a king who built walls around your town and kept foreign armies from invading. This is the king who created a silo and stored up all sorts of his own grain to feed you if a famine should come across the land. This is the king who, when he saw the poor and the sick lying in the streets, picked them up himself and carried them to his own house and took care of them. This is the king who created the schools that your children went to. This is the king who knew your birthday and knocked on your door when it was your birthday and said howdy. This is the king who does everything for you. And one day, that king, the best king possibly imaginable, puts out a call, and he says to you, he calls all of you into his throne room and says, brothers and sisters, we have been attacked. Someone is coming. I need you to defend our land with me. If you join me in arms, it will be difficult. We will sleep outside in the rough. We will eat poor food. It will be hard. It will be long. There will be suffering. But if you join me, we will be victorious. And when we win, you will share in the glory with me, and I will call you brother and sister. Now imagine this great king has just asked you this, and that was the speech he gave you. And imagine you walked away and said no. As you're walking home, think to yourself, after having said no to that call, what is your family going to say when they realize that you told the king no, this great king? What are your friends going to think of you when you walk away and your friends realize that you said no to this great king? The shame, the guilt you would feel. Ignatius is appealing to fear. You should say yes to this great king, at very least out of the fear of being ashamed that you said no to the great king who has done so much for you. Then Ignatius says, okay, how about this? Imagine the guy or the gal who's standing in that room and they say to themselves, you know what, this great king has done so much for me. I owe it to follow this king. And they say yes, the dutiful soldier. And then finally, he says, think about the third one, who looks at the king and out of pure love says, "Dear King, I wish to follow you wherever you go. Wherever you ride, I want to be by your side. Wherever the fighting is the hardest, I want to be with you. I will eat what you eat, drink what you drink, sleep where you sleep. I will serve you, and I will not turn back until we share this victory together out of love." In Ignatius's time, this might as well be rewriting the script of Braveheart and playing it for everybody, right? And getting you to get all excited. And he gets you all worked up in this prayer. Your newfound gratitude from week one still burning in you. And he presents this to you and gives you this Braveheart scenario. And you're all sitting there all excited. And then he drops the bomb and says, now imagine how much you feel like you want to say yes to that love. Now imagine that great king was Christ. How much more should you want to say to Christ, not only will I obey your commands, but I want to go where you went. I want to fight where you fight. I want to sleep where you sleep. If you eat rough, I will eat rough with you. If you suffer, I will suffer with you. If you bleed, I will bleed with you. And together we will share in the victory, and you will call me brother or sister. The true soldier of love. Desmond Doss is the loving soldier who is not only willing, but even desirous of standing with Christ where he went. That is what it means to be a soldier of love. In our Christian lives, we ask ourselves, what kind of sons and daughters are we? Fear, dutiful, or loving? What kind of parents are we? What kind of employees are we? What kind of followers of Christ are we? I work, I am a son, I have my own family, I am a Christian. How ought I serve in all of these? How have I served all of these? How will I serve in all of these? My brothers and sisters, thank you and good night.